I'm Margaret Sullivan, 72 years old, and I never imagined my only son would forbid me from attending my husband's funeral. When Richard died after 49 years of marriage, the pain was unbearable. But nothing prepared me for what Brandon said at the inheritance meeting. This table is only for those who are entitled to something. My heart shattered as he kicked me out. I walked away quietly, but I had already called my lawyer. Before we continue this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear how I turned this devastating betrayal into an unexpected blessing. Richard and I met in college when we were both 19. He was studying business while I pursued my teaching degree. We married after graduation, young and full of dreams for our future. Brandon came along 3 years later, our miracle baby after doctors had told me I might never conceive. I can still remember holding him for the first time, his tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and the overwhelming love that flooded through me. Richard built his company from nothing, working 16-hour days to create what would eventually become Sullivan Enterprises, one of the largest commercial real estate development firms in the Northeast. While he built his empire, I dedicated myself to raising Brandon and teaching 4th grade at Elmwood Elementary. We weren't wealthy at first, living in a modest 2-bedroom apartment until Brandon was 7. I packed lunches, budgeted carefully, and supported Richard's vision because I believed in him completely. When Brandon was 10, we finally moved into our dream home, a beautiful colonial in an upscale neighborhood with excellent schools. Richard wanted Brandon to have every advantage he hadn't had growing up, from private tennis lessons to summer educational programs at prestigious universities. We invested heavily in our son's future. I remember staying up late helping with science projects, driving to countless soccer practices, and cheering at every school event. Richard often missed these moments due to work, but I made sure Brandon never felt his absence too keenly. Despite our comfortable lifestyle, I raised Brandon to understand the value of hard work and compassion. Every summer, we volunteered at the local homeless shelter. Brandon seemed to embrace these values, becoming president of his high school's community service club and maintaining excellent grades. His acceptance to Princeton made us burst with pride. College changed Brandon. He met Valerie during his sophomore year. Beautiful, ambitious, and from one of the wealthiest families in Connecticut. I remember their first visit home together. While Brandon showed her around our house, I overheard her whisper, "It's quaint," with a hint of condescension. Something about her made me uneasy, but Brandon was smitten. Richard, on the other hand, was immediately impressed by her family connections. Valerie's father sits on the board of 3 Fortune 500 companies, he told me excitedly after they left. This relationship could open incredible doors for Brandon. After graduation, Brandon joined Sullivan Enterprises as Richard had always hoped. Within 2 years, he and Valerie married in an extravagant ceremony that cost more than our first house. I thought the grandiose display unnecessary, but Richard insisted our only son deserved the best. The wedding felt more like a business merger than a celebration of love, with more of Richard and Valerie's father's associates in attendance than actual friends. As the years passed, Brandon and Valerie had 2 children, Sophia and William. Being a grandmother brought me immeasurable joy. While Brandon grew increasingly absorbed in the business, I cherished the afternoons spent baking cookies with Sophia or teaching William to read. Those precious hours made up for the growing distance I felt from my son. Richard and Brandon worked closely together, with Richard gradually transferring more responsibility to our son. I noticed subtle changes in Brandon: designer suits, a Rolex collection, membership at the exclusive Hawthorne Club. He began to mirror Valerie's materialistic values and her dismissive attitude toward those she considered beneath her social standing. When the children were 6 and 8, Brandon and Valerie moved to a mansion in the most prestigious neighborhood in the city. Their new home featured 7 bedrooms, a swimming pool, tennis court, and even a small movie theater. At their housewarming party, I overheard Valerie telling her friends, "We finally have a home that reflects Brandon's position." The old place was embarrassingly modest. Richard was diagnosed with heart problems in his late 60s but refused to slow down. "The business needs me," he'd insist when I begged him to reduce his workload. Brandon seemed to encourage this relentless pace, ambitious to prove himself capable of expanding the company even further. I noticed Richard and Brandon having intense conversations that would abruptly end when I entered the room. Once I caught snippets about restructuring and transferring assets, before they quickly changed the subject. When I asked Richard about it later, he kissed my forehead and said, "Just boring business talk, Margaret. Nothing for you to worry about." But I did worry. Something in Richard's eyes didn't match his reassuring words. Still, after nearly 5 decades of marriage, I trusted him completely. He had always taken care of our family, and I believed he always would. Little did I know that the foundation of trust one had built my life upon was about to crumble beneath my feet. The first significant sign that something was wrong came at Richard's 70th birthday celebration. We held an intimate dinner at our home with Brandon, Valerie, and the grandchildren. I had spent days preparing Richard's favorite meals and decorating our dining room with photos spanning our life together. When Brandon arrived, he immediately pulled Richard into his study. They emerged an hour later, Richard looking troubled and Brandon triumphant. Throughout dinner, Richard barely touched his food, while Brandon dominated the conversation with talk of a major new development project. "Dad's stepping back from daily operations," Brandon announced, raising his glass, "to the new president of Sullivan Enterprises." I froze mid-bite. This was the first I'd heard of Richard's retirement. When I glanced at my husband, he avoided my eyes. "You didn't tell me," I said quietly. "It just happened today, Margaret," Richard replied, his voice strained. Brandon thought it would be a nice surprise. Valerie smirked slightly. "Richard deserves to enjoy his golden years. Brandon has been practically running the company anyway." After they left, I confronted Richard. "Why didn't you discuss this with me first?" He sank into his armchair, suddenly looking every one of his 70 years. Brandon presented it as a done deal. "The board already approved it." "But it's your company," I insisted. Richard rubbed his temples. "It's complicated, Margaret. There are financial considerations, tax implications. Brandon has been working with the corporate attorneys on a succession plan. Without involving you? I'm tired," he admitted. "Maybe it is time to step back." Over the next few months, Richard spent more time at home but seemed restless and melancholy. He started missing our weekly dinners with the grandchildren, claiming fatigue. Brandon visited less frequently, always with excuses about being swamped with work. When we did see him, Brandon would often take calls during family time or speak condescendingly about Richard's outdated business practices. "We're finally moving into the 21st century," he'd say, while Richard would stare silently at his hands. I tried addressing my concerns with Brandon during a rare moment alone. "Your father built that company from nothing," I reminded him. "He deserves your respect." Brandon's expression hardened. "Mom, with all due respect, you don't understand modern business. Dad's methods were becoming a liability. I'm protecting his legacy by modernizing. By pushing him out?" "He agreed to step down," Brandon replied coldly. "Maybe focus on planning your next garden club meeting, instead of questioning business decisions." His dismissive tone left me speechless. This wasn't the son I had raised. As spring turned to summer, Richard's health declined rapidly. After a particularly difficult night, I insisted on taking him to the hospital. The diagnosis was devastating: advanced heart failure. The doctor spoke of months, not years. I called Brandon immediately. "Your father is seriously ill. You need to come to the hospital." "I'm in the middle of closing the Westridge deal," he replied. "I'll try to stop by tomorrow." When he finally arrived the next evening, he spent more time on his phone than talking to Richard. Before leaving, he pulled me into the hallway. "We need to discuss practical matters," he said. "Have you thought about where you'll live after, you know?" I stared at him in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" "I'll stay in our home." Brandon shifted uncomfortably. "The thing is, the house is technically owned by Sullivan Enterprises as part of Dad's compensation package. It reverts to the company upon his death." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "That can't be right. That's our home of 30 years. It's all in the contracts Dad signed. You should start looking at retirement communities. Valerie knows a nice one in Maplewood." I returned to Richard's room with tears streaming down my face. When I told him what Brandon had said, he looked stricken. That's not what we agreed to, he whispered. The house was supposed to be transferred to your name. I signed those papers years ago. Then why would Brandon say that? Richard closed his eyes. I need to speak with my personal attorney, not the company lawyers. Call Samuel Winston first thing tomorrow. But tomorrow never came for that conversation. Richard suffered a major heart attack during the night. As the medical team rushed in, his eyes found mine. Trust Samuel, he whispered before losing consciousness. Those were his last words to me. Richard passed away at 3:17 in the morning. I sat beside him, holding his hand as it grew cold, my mind unable to process that my partner of nearly 50 years was gone. The hospital staff were kind, giving me time to say goodbye before gently suggesting I call family members. With shaking hands, I called Brandon. It went to voicemail twice before he finally answered, his voice groggy with sleep. Dad's gone, I said simply, my voice breaking. There was a long pause. I'll handle the arrangements, he finally replied, his tone businesslike. Go home and get some rest. I want to help plan the service, I insisted. Richard and I discussed what he wanted. Valerie has connections with Highland Memorial Gardens. They'll arrange everything appropriately. The company needs to make a public statement first thing in the morning. Before I could protest further, he hung up. I sat in the hospital parking lot, too numb to drive, watching the sunrise through my tears. My husband was gone, and somehow it felt like I'd lost my son too. When I finally returned home, exhausted and heartbroken, there was a message from Brandon saying the funeral would be held in 2 days at Highland Memorial. He provided no further details. I called back immediately. 2 days seems rushed, I said. Richard's sister Judith will need time to travel from Arizona, and his old college friends. We're keeping it intimate, Brandon interrupted. Just immediate family and key business associates. But Richard would want. Mom, I'm handling this. The arrangements are finalized. I took a deep breath. What time should I arrive to help set up? The silence that followed lasted so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Actually, Brandon finally said, Valerie and I think it would be best if you didn't attend. The phone nearly slipped from my grasp. What did you say? Dad's death has significant implications for the business. The service needs to project stability to our investors and partners. Your emotional state would be disruptive. You're barring me from my husband's funeral? My voice rose in disbelief. It's a private corporate event. The lawyers advise keeping it strictly professional given the circumstances. What circumstances? I demanded. We can discuss that after the service. Take some time to grieve privately. It's better this way. He hung up before I could respond. I stood in my kitchen. The kitchen where Richard and I had shared thousands of meals, where we'd laughed and argued and made up, and felt something inside me break. My son was preventing me from saying goodbye to my husband. I called Samuel Winston immediately, Richard's personal attorney and our friend of 30 years. His shock matched my own. That's outrageous, Margaret. Of course you should be at the funeral. Let me speak with Brandon. An hour later, Samuel called back, his voice grim. Brandon refused to budge. He's claiming the service is a private corporate event on private property. Technically, he can control the guest list. This can't be happening, I whispered. Margaret, there's something else you should know. Richard contacted me the week before he passed away, very concerned about changes to his estate planning documents. He scheduled an appointment that was supposed to be tomorrow. He wouldn't elaborate over the phone, but he seemed deeply troubled. Samuel's words sent a chill through me. Richard's last words, trust Samuel, suddenly took on new meaning. What should I do about the funeral? I asked. Samuel sighed. Fighting this publicly would only cause you more pain. But I suggest we meet as soon as possible to discuss your legal position. The day of Richard's funeral was the longest of my life. I sat alone in our home, surrounded by photographs of our life together, unable to say a proper goodbye. Susan Porter, my closest friend, came over with food I couldn't eat and comfort I couldn't feel. This isn't right, she kept saying. How can Brandon do this to you? I had no answer. The son I had raised, the boy who once made me Mother's Day cards with handprints and wrote "World's Best Mom" in crooked letters, was now a stranger to me. The next morning, I received a formal email from Sullivan Enterprises corporate secretary. Your presence is requested at a meeting regarding the estate of Richard Sullivan. Tomorrow 2 p.m. Sullivan Enterprises headquarters. Samuel insisted on accompanying me. Whatever is happening here isn't right, he said. Richard would never have wanted you treated this way. When we arrived at the gleaming office building that housed Sullivan Enterprises, Brandon's assistant escorted us to the main conference room. Brandon sat at the head of the table, flanked by Valerie and 3 men in expensive suits. My grandchildren were nowhere to be seen. Mother, Brandon acknowledged coldly, I wasn't expecting you to bring counsel. Given the circumstances, it seemed prudent, Samuel replied before I could speak. Brandon's jaw tightened. This meeting is for beneficiaries of my father's estate and company shareholders. Mr. Winston, unless you represent one of those parties, I'll have to ask you to leave. I represent Margaret Sullivan, Samuel stated firmly. Brandon shook his head. This table is only for those who are entitled to something from the estate. According to the updated documents, my mother isn't among them. The room spun around me. What are you saying? I managed to ask. Brandon slid a document across the table. Dad signed a new will 3 months ago. The house, his personal assets, his shares in the company, everything transfers to me as his successor. There are provisions for the grandchildren's education, but nothing else. That's impossible, I whispered. Richard would never disinherit me. He made a business decision, Brandon replied without emotion. The company needed to consolidate ownership for tax purposes. He signed the papers voluntarily. I looked at the signature on the document. It looked like Richard's, but something was off. The familiar flourish at the end of our last name was missing. Samuel examined the document carefully. This will need to be thoroughly reviewed. Richard's intentions were quite different in our previous discussions. Brandon stood abruptly. The documents are legally binding. Now I have a board meeting to prepare for. Mom, you'll need to vacate the house by the end of the month. Valerie has prepared information on several suitable retirement communities. Valerie slid a glossy brochure toward me with a practiced smile. The Willows has a 6-month waiting list, but I've spoken to the director. They can accommodate you next week. I stared at her, then at my son. In that moment, I didn't recognize either of them. I simply called my lawyer, I said quietly, standing up. And it seems I was right to do so. As Samuel and I turned to leave, Brandon called after me. Don't make this difficult, Mom. Dad made his wishes clear. I paused at the door. Did he? Or did you make your wishes clear to him? The slight flush on Brandon's face told me everything I needed to know. The days following that devastating meeting passed in a blur. I moved mechanically through our home, my home, touching Richard's books, his favorite chair, the collection of sea glass we'd gathered over decades of beach walks. Everything held memories, and the thought of leaving them behind was unbearable. Samuel worked tirelessly, reviewing documents and making calls. A week after the inheritance meeting, he arrived at my door with a serious expression. Margaret, I found something significant. Richard came to my office 2 months ago and left a sealed envelope with instructions to open it only if questions arose about his estate. I think it's time. We sat at my kitchen table as Samuel carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter in Richard's handwriting and a small USB drive. My dearest Margaret, the letter began. If you're reading this, my worst fears have come to pass. Brandon has been pressuring me to sign new estate documents that would effectively disinherit you. He claims it's for tax purposes and the good of the company, but I suspect his motivations are far less noble. I've been recording our conversations as evidence. On this drive, you'll find audio files proving I never willingly agreed to change our arrangements. The signature on any new will or transfer documents is either coerced or forged. I've also secretly transferred funds to an account in your name. Samuel has the details. I'm sorry for not telling you sooner, but Brandon has been monitoring our conversations and accounts. Trust Samuel completely. He knows what to do. I love you more than anything in this world. Forgive me for not standing up to our son more forcefully. Perhaps I indulged him too much. All my love, Richard. Tears streamed down my face as Samuel squeezed my hand. We have what we need to fight this, he said gently. That night, I listened to the recordings with growing horror. Brandon's voice was cold, calculating as he pressured his ailing father. Just sign the papers, Dad. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I won't leave your mother vulnerable, Richard's weaker voice replied. She built this life with me. She deserves security. Mom has never understood business. She'll waste everything you've built with her charitable impulses and outdated values. The company needs strong leadership and consolidated ownership. The company was never meant to be the legacy. Family was. Sign the papers or I'll have to take more drastic measures. The board is already questioning your competence. The threats continued across multiple recordings, becoming increasingly explicit. The final recording captured Brandon admitting to forging Richard's signature after he refused to sign. We have enough evidence for criminal charges, Samuel said after we'd listened to everything. But you need to decide if that's what you want. I spent a sleepless night considering my options. By morning I knew what I had to do. I don't want my grandchildren to see their father go to prison, I told Samuel. But I won't allow Brandon to rob me of what Richard and I built together. Samuel nodded. I understand. Let me propose an alternative approach. 2 days later, we arrived unannounced at Sullivan Enterprises. Brandon's assistant tried to block our entry to his office, but Samuel firmly stated that Brandon would want to see us immediately. Brandon looked up from his desk with annoyance. I'm in the middle of something important. More important than avoiding prison for fraud and elder abuse? Samuel asked, placing a folder on Brandon's desk. Brandon's face paled as he scanned the contents: transcripts of the recordings, forensic analysis of the forged signatures, bank records showing suspicious transfers. What do you want? He finally asked, his voice barely audible. What Richard wanted, I replied calmly. My home remains mine. My rightful share of Richard's personal estate returns to me. And while you can keep your position at the company, 40% of Richard's shares transfer back to me, with my seat on the board restored. The company will suffer. The company will benefit from ethical leadership, Samuel interrupted. This offer expires in 24 hours. After that, we go to the authorities. Brandon stared at the documents, then at me. For a moment, I glimpsed fear in his eyes, not just of legal consequences, but of losing everything he'd schemed to obtain. You would do this to your own son? He asked. You did this to yourself, I replied, my heart breaking all over again. And to your father who loved you unconditionally. He signed the agreement without further argument. As we left his office, I felt no triumph, only profound sadness. I had won back my material security but lost something far more precious, my trust in my only child. That evening, alone in the home that was now legally mine again, I realized I couldn't stay. Every room echoed with both beautiful memories of Richard and painful ones of Brandon's betrayal. I needed a fresh start. Susan arrived with dinner and found me sorting through photographs. You're not giving up, are you? She asked, concerned. Not giving up, I replied. Moving forward. Over the next few weeks, I made decisions that surprised even me. I sold the family home, on my terms, not Brandon's, and purchased a beautiful cottage near the coast, something Richard and I had always dreamed of doing in retirement. I used part of my inheritance to establish a foundation supporting education for underprivileged children, honoring Richard's belief in giving back. Most significantly, I enrolled in art classes at the local college, finally pursuing the passion I had set aside decades ago to support Richard's career and raise our son. My first tentative brushstrokes felt like reclaiming a piece of myself long forgotten. Susan introduced me to her widowed brother Henry, a retired literature professor with kind eyes and a gentle sense of humor. Our coffee meetings to discuss books gradually evolved into dinners where we shared stories of our lives. His friendship became an unexpected source of comfort. 3 months after Richard's death, I held a memorial service, the proper goodbye my husband deserved. I invited everyone who had loved him: his sister Judith, college friends, former employees, neighbors. Brandon didn't attend, but to my surprise, Valerie brought the children. After the service, 8-year-old Sophia hugged me tightly. I miss Grandpa, she whispered. And I miss you too. Why don't you come over anymore? Her innocent question pierced my heart. In protecting myself from Brandon's cruelty, I had distanced myself from my grandchildren. I miss you too, sweetheart, I told her. Perhaps you and William could visit my new house by the ocean sometime. Valerie, overhearing, gave a tight smile. We'll see. Things are complicated right now. I approached her privately before she left. The children shouldn't suffer because of adult conflicts. She hesitated, then nodded slightly. Brandon is struggling. The board is questioning his leadership after everything that happened. That's between Brandon and the board, I replied. My relationship with my grandchildren is separate. 2 weeks later, to my astonishment, Valerie called asking if the children could stay with me for the weekend while she and Brandon attended a business conference. It was a small olive branch, but I grasped it gratefully. That weekend with Sophia and William became the first step in rebuilding what had been broken. Not with Brandon, whose wounds would take much longer to heal, but with the next generation, who deserved the love of their grandmother. As summer turned to fall, I found myself creating a new life I hadn't imagined possible. My cottage became a gathering place for new friends. My paintings began selling at a local gallery, and twice a month my grandchildren's laughter filled my home. The foundation I established in Richard's memory funded its first scholarships. At the award ceremony, I spoke publicly about Richard's belief in education as a path to opportunity. Several business publications covered the event. The next day, I received an unexpected email from Brandon. The scholarship recipient's stories were moving. Dad would have been proud. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. Winter arrived with unexpected challenges. A phone call from Valerie in early December shattered the peaceful routine I had established. Brandon's in the hospital, she said, her normally composed voice trembling. He collapsed during a board meeting. The doctors are saying it's a heart attack. My own heart seemed to stop. Despite everything, Brandon was still my son, my only child. Which hospital? I asked, already reaching for my car keys. At the cardiac care unit, I found Valerie pacing the waiting room, her perfect appearance uncharacteristically disheveled. The children sat quietly in the corner, fear evident in their young faces. They're running tests, she said when she saw me. They won't tell me anything else. I hugged my grandchildren, then approached the nurse's station. The charge nurse recognized me immediately. Mrs. Sullivan, we were hoping you'd come. Your son has been asking for you. Brandon lay pale against the hospital sheets, monitors beeping steadily around him. When he saw me, surprise flashed across his face, followed by something I hadn't seen in years: vulnerability. Mom, he whispered. You came. Of course I came, I replied, taking his hand. You're my son. The doctor explained that Brandon had suffered a minor heart attack, likely stress-induced. His heart shows the same weakness his father's did, she told us. He needs to make significant lifestyle changes. When we were alone, Brandon closed his eyes. I'm becoming him, working myself to death for a company that will replace me before my body's cold. The bitterness in his voice surprised me. Your father worked hard because he wanted to provide for us, to give you opportunities he never had. And look how I repaid him. Look how I treated you. His voice broke. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I understand now what I've done. It wasn't a full apology, but the acknowledgement moved me deeply. We can't change the past, Brandon, but we don't have to let it determine our future. During his recovery, I visited daily, sometimes sitting quietly while he slept, other times helping Valerie with the children. One afternoon, I arrived to find Brandon sitting up, reviewing company documents despite doctor's orders. Some habits are hard to break, he said sheepishly when he saw my disapproving look. Richard was the same way, too stubborn to slow down, even when his body demanded it. I sat beside him. The company survived when he stepped back. It will survive if you take time to heal. The board is already discussing a temporary replacement, he admitted. Valerie is furious. She thinks I'm losing my grip on everything we've worked for. I chose my words carefully. Is that what you've been working for? Position? Power? Or something else? He stared out the window for a long moment. I don't know anymore. When Dad died, I thought taking complete control would finally prove I was worthy of his legacy. Now I'm not sure what that legacy even is. Your father's true legacy isn't Sullivan Enterprises, I told him gently. It's the values he lived by. Integrity, compassion, putting family first. The company was just a means to support those values. The months of Brandon's recovery became a tentative rebuilding period for our relationship. He took a leave of absence from the company, following his doctor's orders with an uncharacteristic humility. During this time, something unexpected happened. Brandon began to change. It started with small gestures. Asking about my art classes, looking through old family albums with the children, calling occasionally just to check in. The arrogance that had dominated his personality for so long seemed to diminish as he faced his own mortality. In early spring, Brandon asked if he and the family could visit my cottage. Their arrival was awkward at first, with Valerie clearly uncomfortable in my modest home. But the children's delight at being near the ocean soon broke the tension. While they built sandcastles with their father, Valerie and I sat on the porch with uncomfortable silence between us. Brandon's different since the heart attack, she finally said. Less driven. More present with the children. Is that difficult for you? I asked carefully. She considered the question honestly. I married him because he was ambitious and focused. Now he talks about simplifying, spending more time at home. She watched her husband laughing with the children. But I've never seen him this happy. People change, I said. Sometimes by choice, sometimes because life forces them to. The board is pressuring him to make a decision, return full-time or step down permanently. She turned to me with unexpected directness. What do you think he should do? I think that's a decision only Brandon can make. But I hope he chooses what will bring him true fulfillment, not just success. That evening, after Valerie took the children to bed, Brandon and I walked along the shoreline. The setting sun painted the water in shades of gold and crimson. I've been meeting with a therapist, he confessed suddenly, trying to understand why I became so ruthless, especially with you and Dad. And what have you discovered? I asked. That I've spent my entire adult life trying to earn Dad's approval, even after he was gone. That I confused success with worth. He stopped walking, turning to face me. And that I hurt the people who loved me most in the process. Tears filled my eyes as Brandon continued. I'll never be able to undo what I did. Keeping you from Dad's funeral, trying to take everything from you. It's unforgivable. But I want you to know I'm truly sorry, Mom. For all of it. The apology I had waited for, had almost stopped expecting, hung in the salt air between us. I took a deep breath. I forgive you, Brandon. Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger only hurts me more. Your father would want us to heal this rift. He nodded, wiping away his own tears. There's something else I need to tell you. I'm resigning as CEO of Sullivan Enterprises. The announcement shocked me. Are you sure that's what you want? For the first time in my life, yes. I'm keeping my board position and shares, but stepping away from daily operations. I want to start something new, a foundation that works alongside the one you created. Supporting sustainable business education for underprivileged youth. Your father would be proud of that, I said softly. Would you consider being involved? We could work together if you're willing. The invitation represented more than a professional collaboration. It was an olive branch, a chance to rebuild our relationship through shared purpose. Despite my lingering caution, I found myself nodding. I'd like that, Brandon. I really would. The announcement of Brandon's resignation from Sullivan Enterprises created shockwaves in the business community. Speculation ran rampant. Was he forced out? Was the company in trouble? Was his health worse than reported? Brandon handled the transition with surprising grace, introducing his successor, Janet Fleming, a longtime company executive, with genuine support. At the press conference, he spoke candidly about his heart attack and his desire to prioritize family and charitable work. Sullivan Enterprises was my father's vision, he told reporters. He built it to support families and communities, not just to generate profits. In stepping back, I'm honoring that original mission by creating the Sullivan Family Foundation, which will focus on business education and entrepreneurship opportunities for underserved youth. When asked about my involvement, Brandon's answer brought tears to my eyes. My mother will serve as co-director. Her wisdom and compassion have always been the heart of our family, and now they'll help guide our foundation's work. Setting up the foundation created a new dynamic between us. Working together revealed sides of Brandon I hadn't seen since he was young. His creativity, his ability to inspire others, his genuine concern for the foundation's scholarship recipients. Gradually, our professional collaboration evolved into a more comfortable personal relationship. Not everyone supported this new direction. Valerie struggled with Brandon's reduced income and lower profile in business circles. Their arguments, once private, began spilling over into family gatherings. "We've had to cancel our membership at the Hawthorne Club," she complained during Sunday dinner at my cottage. "Do you know how long the waiting list is to get in?" "Years, Brandon. Years of networking gone." "We still have more than enough," Brandon replied calmly. "The children don't need 3 country club memberships. They need time with their father." I excused myself to give them privacy, but not before noting the fundamental disconnect in their values, a rift that seemed to be widening as Brandon changed. The Foundation's first major initiative was a summer business academy for high school students from low-income communities. Brandon threw himself into the curriculum development, drawing on his years of experience, but presenting it with a new emphasis on ethical leadership and community impact. I focused on creating a supportive environment for the students, many of whom had never been exposed to professional opportunities before. Watching Brandon mentor these young people, patient, encouraging, nothing like the cutthroat businessman he'd once been, filled me with hope that his transformation was genuine and lasting. The Academy's culminating event was a presentation day where student teams pitched their business ideas to local entrepreneurs and investors. The energy in the room was electric as these talented young people, now confident in their abilities, outlined innovative solutions to community problems. Afterward, one of the investors approached Brandon and me. "Richard would be immensely proud of what you've created here," he said. "This is a true legacy." Brandon squeezed my hand, the shared acknowledgement of his father's values bringing us closer. That fall brought unexpected challenges. Valerie filed for divorce, citing Brandon's complete personality change and abandonment of our lifestyle. The proceedings quickly turned acrimonious, with Valerie seeking full custody of the children and a substantial portion of Brandon's remaining assets. The custody battle particularly devastated Brandon. "She's telling the court I'm mentally unstable because I chose family over work," he told me, voice breaking. "That my heart condition makes me an unfit parent." I found myself in the strange position of supporting my son through a divorce, just as he had once tried to strip me of everything after Richard's death. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "I deserve this," he said during a particularly difficult day after a heated court appearance. "It's karma for how I treated you. No one deserves to be separated from their children," I replied firmly. "And neither Sophia nor William deserve to lose their father's presence in their lives." I suggested Brandon consult Samuel Winston, whose expertise had saved me after Richard's death. Initially reluctant, after how I treated him during the inheritance dispute, Brandon eventually agreed out of desperation. Samuel, ever professional, took the case. "People make mistakes," he told Brandon at their first meeting, which I attended for moral support. "What matters is how you make amends and move forward." With Samuel's guidance, Brandon fought for joint custody, presenting evidence of his involvement in the children's lives since stepping back from the company. The case dragged on for months, draining Brandon emotionally and financially. During this difficult period, an unexpected alliance formed. The children, now 10 and 12, became increasingly vocal about wanting time with both parents. Sophia especially demonstrated a maturity beyond her years. "Dad's different now," she told the court-appointed guardian during an interview. "He comes to my swim meets and helps with homework. Before, he was always working." The custody evaluation ultimately recommended joint physical custody, acknowledging Brandon's positive involvement in his children's lives despite Valerie's objections. Throughout this ordeal, my relationship with my grandchildren deepened. My cottage became their weekend refuge, a place where family game nights and beach explorations replaced the lavish but empty entertainment of their previous lifestyle. William discovered a talent for photography, documenting our nature walks with an artistic eye that reminded me of Richard. Sophia revealed an interest in marine biology, spending hours with field guides identifying the creatures in our tide pools. One evening, as Brandon helped the children build a driftwood sculpture on the beach, I watched from the porch, marveling at how life can come full circle. The man who had once been consumed by greed and status was now finding joy in simple moments with his children. Exactly what Richard had been too busy building the company to experience. When the divorce was finally settled that winter, Brandon faced another difficult decision. The substantial settlement had forced him to sell his mansion and downsize considerably. "I need to find a new place," he told me. "Somewhere the kids will feel comfortable during their time with me." I hesitated, then made an offer that surprised us both. "There's the guest cottage on my property. It needs renovation, but it would give you privacy while keeping you close to the children when they're here. And," I smiled, "free childcare when you need it." Brandon's eyes widened. "You'd want me living that close? After everything?" "Family is complicated," I said simply. "But it's still family." The renovation project became another opportunity for healing as Brandon and I worked together, making decisions about the cottage just as Richard and I had once collaborated on our first home. Sometimes, in the way Brandon would consider options carefully before deciding, I caught glimpses of Richard's thoughtfulness. By spring, the cottage was complete, modest compared to Brandon's former mansion but warm and welcoming. The children helped furnish their rooms, excited about the proximity to both the ocean and their grandmother. As we celebrated with a small housewarming gathering, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past 18 months. From the devastating exclusion from Richard's funeral to creating a new kind of family unit, one built on forgiveness, growth, and second chances. Susan raised her glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," she said, looking around at our unconventional family gathering. Brandon, the children, Henry, and several of the foundation students who had become regular visitors. "To remembering what truly matters," Brandon added, meeting my eyes with genuine warmth. The foundation continued to flourish, expanding its programs to include mentorship for young entrepreneurs and small business grants for program graduates. Brandon's business acumen, now tempered with compassion, proved invaluable in creating sustainable initiatives. When Valerie announced she was moving to New York for a new relationship, another adjustment loomed. The children would live primarily with Brandon during the school year, visiting their mother during holidays and summer. This unexpected development brought both challenges and opportunities as our beach property transformed into a full-time family home. Despite all the progress, occasional tensions reminded us that healing takes time. During a foundation board meeting, Brandon and I disagreed strongly about a strategic direction. His old authoritarian tendencies briefly surfaced as he dismissed my concerns without consideration. Later, recognizing his behavior, he came to apologize. "Old habits," he said ruefully. "I'm still learning." "We both are," I assured him. "Disagreement doesn't mean disrespect. Your father and I argued plenty about decisions, but we always listened to each other." Brandon nodded thoughtfully. "I never saw that side of your relationship. You always presented a united front to me. That was intentional. But behind closed doors we had our battles. The difference was we fought fair and remembered we were on the same team." These glimpses into Richard's and my relationship seemed to help Brandon navigate his new role as a single parent and his evolving relationship with me. Not perfect, not without occasional setbacks, but moving steadily toward something healthy and whole. 3 years after Richard's death, our lives had transformed in ways I could never have imagined during those dark days when Brandon excluded me from the funeral and tried to take everything from me. The foundation had become a respected institution in the community, having supported over 100 young entrepreneurs through education and startup funding. Brandon served as executive director, his business expertise now channeled into empowering others rather than accumulating personal wealth and power. I divided my time between foundation work, my growing reputation as a local artist, and my cherished role as grandmother. At 75, I had found a fulfilling second chapter one never expected to have. The relationship between Brandon and me had evolved into something neither of us could have predicted. A partnership of equals based on mutual respect and shared purpose. The wounds of the past hadn't disappeared entirely, but they had scarred over, no longer causing fresh pain with every interaction. One sunny afternoon, as we prepared for the Foundation's annual scholarship ceremony, Brandon found me looking through old photographs for a presentation honoring Richard's legacy. "I still miss him," Brandon said quietly, sitting beside me. "Especially at events like tomorrow's. He would have loved seeing what we've built." "He sees," I replied, touching a photo of Richard holding infant Brandon. "And yes, he would be proud, not of the Foundation's success, but of the healing it represents." Brandon picked up a family portrait taken on his high school graduation day, the three of us smiling, his future seemingly limitless. I spent so many years trying to prove myself to him, thinking the company was his true legacy. I completely missed the point. Which was that his real legacy was family, values, community. Brandon's voice grew thoughtful. "When I collapsed in that boardroom, my last thought wasn't about the company or deals or status. It was regret that I'd wasted so much time on things that don't matter in the end." I squeezed his hand. Richard made the same realization near the end. He told me his biggest regret was not spending more time with you when you were young. "I'm trying not to repeat that mistake with Sophia and William," Brandon said. "Even with the Foundation growing, I'm home for dinner every night. No working weekends. No missed school events." The next day, as Sophia and William helped set up chairs for the scholarship ceremony, I watched them with Henry, who had become an important part of our extended family. His gentle wisdom and love of literature had enriched all our lives, especially the children's. "Grandmother," Sophia called, now a poised 13-year-old, "can we show the new students my tide pool guidebook?" She had compiled her observations and photographs into a resource the Foundation shared with local schools. "Of course," I smiled. "Your grandfather would be so proud of your scientific mind." As guests began arriving, I observed Brandon greeting each scholarship recipient by name, taking genuine interest in their progress. The arrogant executive who once dismissed people he considered beneath him was gone, replaced by a man who recognized the value in every person's journey. During the ceremony, Brandon invited me to join him at the podium for the keynote address. We had decided to speak together about resilience and reconciliation, themes that resonated deeply with our audience of young people overcoming significant obstacles. "My journey began with loss," I told them. "The loss of my beloved husband and temporarily the loss of my relationship with my son. But endings often create space for new beginnings." Brandon continued. 3 years ago, I made terrible choices driven by greed and ambition. I nearly destroyed my relationship with my mother permanently. My heart attack became a wake-up call that forced me to re-examine everything I thought mattered. Together, we shared the story of our rebuilding, not the painful details of his betrayal, but the process of healing and creating something meaningful from the ashes of broken trust. "The Foundation isn't just our way of giving back," I explained. "It's our way of moving forward together, creating a legacy that honors what Richard Sullivan truly valued: opportunity, education, and family." As we concluded, Brandon added an unplanned personal note. "My mother taught me that forgiveness isn't about excusing harmful actions. It's about refusing to let those actions define your future. Her example of dignity and resilience is the greatest inheritance I could have received, worth infinitely more than any material wealth." The applause that followed felt like a benediction, a communal acknowledgement of the journey we had traveled. Later that evening, our extended family gathered at my cottage for dinner. Brandon, the children, Henry, Susan and her family, and several Foundation students who had become part of our circle. As conversation and laughter filled the rooms, I stepped onto the porch for a moment of quiet reflection. The setting sun cast golden light across the water, reminding me of countless evenings Richard and I had shared dreaming of a future just like this, surrounded by family in our coastal home. Though he wasn't physically present, I felt his spirit in the values now being lived out through our son and grandchildren. Brandon joined me, offering a cup of tea. "Penny for your thoughts?" "Just gratitude," I replied. "For second chances. For the wisdom that sometimes comes only through pain." "I've been thinking about what to tell the children about those early days after Dad died," Brandon said. They're getting old enough to ask questions. Tell them the truth, I suggested. That grief can bring out the worst in people sometimes. That mistakes, even terrible ones, don't have to be the end of the story. He nodded slowly. And that forgiveness is possible, even when it seems impossible. Especially then, I agreed. As we rejoined the gathering inside, I looked around at the beautiful tapestry of relationships that had formed from the tattered remnants of what once seemed destroyed beyond repair. In my 75 years, I had learned that life rarely follows the path we expect, that profound loss can eventually yield unexpected gifts, and that the human heart has a remarkable capacity for both wounding and healing. What would you do if faced with such betrayal from someone you loved? Could you find the strength to forgive and rebuild? Or would you choose a different path? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of family healing and second chances. And remember to share with someone who might need encouragement that even the deepest wounds can eventually heal. Thank you for listening to my journey.